coffee, big cup, and hello. Welcome to another episode of the Gilmore Way Podcast, the first of our discussions for Season 3 of the show. A massively important part of this show was always its focus on music, from the La-Las to Lane's cosmic to-do list and her band, to simultaneous listens of Macy Gray and Town Troubadours, to an amazing soundtrack and even a Stars Hollow musical. Music was always a huge part of the cultural lexicon of the writing, and also several character arcs, so this week we'll be taking a look at the most significant musical moments on the show.
Before we get into our synopses, this is your reminder that we are a Spoilers All podcast. So if you haven't watched the show yet, first off, what are you doing? Because the show is obviously amazing. Go watch it. And secondly, come back once you've binged it because it's worth it. And if you could quickly hit the like and subscribe, that really helps us out. And if you're feeling particularly ambitious, a share and a comment would also be amazing. It truly does help us out, and we're so grateful for everyone's support. All right, let's get into it.
Season 3 kicks us off with the lazy, hazy, crazy days. And fresh off her major disappointment with Christopher, Lorelai has a dream that she and Luke are not only together, but she's having his twins. Rory and Paris attend a leadership program in Washington for 6 weeks, which gives Rory the opportunity to distance herself from the drama with Dean and the kiss with Jess at Suki's wedding. But it's clear she's thinking about one more than the other. Rory helps Paris prepare for her first date with Jamie, a handsome Princeton freshman who is taking a liking to her intelligence and ruthless nature. Upon Rory's return to Stars Hollow, she spots Jess at the end of Summer Madness Festival with another girl, and her anger causes Lorelai to call her out for waffling and her treatment of Dean.
Rightly so.
Mm-hmm.
Episode 2 is Haunted Leg. A new school year has begun at Chilton, and the senior class president, our old friend Francie Jarvis, gives Rory and Paris a hard time. Emily and Richard return from their summer on Martha's Vineyard, which means it's finally time for Lorelai to tell them about the breakup with Christopher because of Sherry's pregnancy, which doesn't go well. Emily tries to interfere by having lunch with Lorelai and telling her she needs to convince Christopher to be with her anyway, which Lorelai obviously doesn't want to do. Christopher shows up at Friday night dinner because Lorelai has been dodging his calls, and a huge fight ensues. Kirk also asks Lorelai on a date, which she kindly turns down because she's not in a good place to date and because she doesn't want to jeopardize that friendship.
Yeah.
So wholesome. We love Kirk.
Strong start to Season 3.
Yeah.
I like it. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about music.
Well,
so
one of the reasons I wanted to...
Sorry.
One of the reasons...
What you want to hit first? Pun intended.
Sorry I interrupted a pun.
Okay.
But I was just about to say, one of the reasons I thought this would be a fun time to talk about music is because Lazy Hazy Crazy Days is still stuck in my head, and I haven't been able to get it out with the Small World song.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
But I will go back to my original question. What note first?
Where shall we begin? Why don't we start with just basically our favorite musical moments?
The Tom Tom Club in their revival, where they just sneak off into the room and Luke is just like, don't you dare go in there and play that song. And they just sneak in and do it anyway. It's so quick, but it's so funny. And I just think it embodies the relationship that the Gilmore Girls have with Luke. And just knowing that they're still the same mother and daughter, and they still have that dynamic that we have all come to know and love, even though Luke is such a central part of Lorelai's life right now that hasn't changed. So I just thought that was a really fun and sweet nod to the relationship that our two Gilmore Girls have with one another, and that Luke is just fitting into it perfectly and just accepting all of the nonsense and the craziness that comes from these girls.
It's true. I was actually listening to that song right before we started. I have an entire playlist of Gilmore music on my phone, obviously, which we listened to extensively throughout our road trip last summer. And that came on in the shuffle. And I was like, dun, 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 dun. And I just heard Luke in my head, like, don't you dare play that song.
Get out of the room.
And it's so funny because like as you listen to more than just that opening 5 or 10 seconds, you're like, yeah, Luke absolutely would hate this song. It would be like, please don't play that song anymore. It's so Lorelai to play it and so Luke to hate it. It's perfect.
What other good moments?
One of mine is the very opening scene of the entire series. There She Goes by the Laws. It's perfect. You see the main drag of Stars Hollow and you see Lorelai, and it's like it's her world and we're just living in it. And I love it. It's a great song. I liked the song before I was ever a fan of the show. And I'm glad they made the change from Every Day's a Winding Road.
Same. Yeah. I see a lot of people contentious with that change, and I'm like, but it's so much better. Like,
it fits the vibe better.
It fits Lorelai better. It does everything that we need it to do. I can't even if it wasn't Winding Road, like what song could have encapsulated that moment and that woman better than that? I can't think of any.
No, it was pun totally intended. Pitch perfect. Hey. All right. Another one.
I will say Enough for Us by XTC. When they're dancing around in the kitchen to one another, making breakfast. Again, it's not a song I was ever familiar with prior to the show, but I've listened to it extensively since then. And it's also not something I would have ever picked, probably because I didn't know about it, but also I just never would have thought it would fit in the way that it does. But I think the camera movement and the way that these two women bounced off of one another in terms of physicality in that scene and movement, like they made it work. And I just love seeing them getting ready for their day. And the song lyrics embody that. Like, yeah, Lorelai's going to work, Rory's going to school, but they are just two women trying to get by, even though that song I think was, made for more like just couples trying to make it. It still fit and it still worked for how they were about to go and start their day.
I 100% agree. I love that song. I also had never heard of XTC, and now I'm a bit of a fan, at least of the show's picks for songs. There's quite a few. We'll get to another one in a little bit, I'm sure, once we move on to season 3. And it's funny because, that makes me think music or sound. And in this case, it's non-diegetic. Like, the characters can't hear it, but that song is telling us something very important about these characters and how they are just so in sync with each other all the time, and how, yeah, like you said, it really is just them kind of getting through their day, getting on with it. And that brings me to my next pick, which is actually a diegetic choice that does something very similar, which is when they both play I Try by Macy Gray at the same time. Again, they had referenced it in the cold open, and then they both just listened to it at the same time, and it shows like the brain waves are so in tune with each other that they even pick the same song to listen to at the same moment. And the show plays with that a lot. The whole like what the characters can hear and what the audience can hear, and how that impacts our views of these characters.
I will also say anything that Sam Phillips does is magical and wonderful. So it's hard to just pick one, but I will say Reflecting Light. And the scene around the gazebo in the town square and all of the lights and the orchestration that Kirk has done to get the square ready. It's so beautiful to look at, first off, but it's made even more wonderful by that song choice and by just having that in the background as you see Lorelai and Luke dancing around one another as they're getting ready for one of the biggest life changes that these women are about to experience. And I say that because it's about to affect Rory's life too, but what a beautiful montage. And again, I feel like I'm going to say this about everything that I love. I could not think of a better song to insert there.
I, too, absolutely freaking adore that song. And I just listen to it fairly regularly. And obviously, it's also used in season 4 for their first dance. And I think it's one of the first times, or only times, that a song like that is used more than once for narrative and dramatic effect. I think there might be a few songs that are played twice, just sort of like running in the background or, you know, as literal background noise to the show. Candyman is a good example of that, which we'll come back to a little bit later as well. That's on another one of my lists. You know, because Taylor kind of sings it when he opens the shop, and then there's the Rory and Dean scene. But Reflecting Light is the only one that is sort of like purposefully used as this bookend.
Mm-hmm.
Liz and TJ's wedding and their first dance to their own wedding. And it's perfect. And I love it.
Yeah.
So there's that. Another one of mine is One Line by PJ Harvey, which is the song that plays when Rory and Dean reconnect at the end of season 1, right after Tristan has right after he's offered to take her to PJ Harvey, and she shuts him down. She has no interest in going, and Dean sees him with her books, and he thinks that something's happening between them, and she's like, no. And so the fact that they use PJ Harvey in that moment, I was like, suck it, Tristan.
Yeah. Rightly so. We've had thoughts on Tristan. Go back and watch some of our episodes to find him. I will say, I think that's all of my top tier moments. There are more that I love, but if I listed all of them, it makes the top tier moments not top tier anymore. And they have to hold that spot for a reason.
Yeah. I mean, okay. I mean, I guess I didn't specify top tier. I just said like some of your favorites. So, because I have a whole freaking list.
I could go over everything Sam Phillips, like, but I'll just blanket statement everything Sam Phillips, just all of it. There's no missteps there. It's just perfect.
Fair. And I was sort of going chronologically. Yeah. I was going kind of chronologically with mine too. And so I'm like, well, I've really only had season 1. Let's get into season 2. Because I think season 2 is sort of like a sleeper season for excellent music, because you got like season 2 opens with I Found Love, and Suki references Sadie, married lady. And, you know, so the episode title even comes from the song from a musical with Barbara freaking Streisand references. And actually Hammers and Veils, I think, is a sleeper episode of great songs. It's got Love Will Keep Us Together, One Fine Day, Love Is Everywhere I Go, Spring Released by Great Lake Buffalo. It's just, I don't know. I find that whole sequence at the end with the bridal shower just knocks that out of the park with the musical moments. How can we forget Girls Just Want to Have Fun?
Also true.
The fashion show. I'm a big personal fan of It's All Right by Comida at the end of Like Mother, Like Daughter, when Rory puts her headphones back in after nearly getting suspended. Yep. You brought this one up at one point, Que Sera.
Que Sera, Doris Day. Oh, my goodness. Just like that, I will listen to that song even outside of Gilmore Girls, and just, it's so good. And yeah, chef's kiss.
Yeah. When Lane gets the cheer squad to cheer to One Step Beyond by Madness. That's a good one. One of my absolute favorites, okay, this is a top tier for me. What a Wonderful World by Joey Ramone. Lost and Found. With Luke and the sledgehammer. That whole scene is just brilliant.
Yeah. I'm going to jump forward a little bit because I know you're going chronologically, but I Will Always Love You.
That's like way far ahead.
I know. I said I was going to jump ahead, but yeah, like, I know. Great song, but great moment.
Yes. Another important Lorelai Rory moment, but also Lorelai and Luke, because it's sort of like, it starts out being an ode to her daughter, and then she catches Luke's eye. It's like suddenly, it's funny because it parallels what Rory says in Love Daisies and Troubadours about how, you know, sometimes you don't really have the words and you need to put it into a song. And that was a moment where Lorelai was trying to express something to Luke through music. And so again, with the bookends, like near the end of season 1, near the end of season 7, switch the characters, switch the scenarios, and you have a very similar moment. And I don't know if that was intentional or if it was just perfect kismet, but either way, incredible.
Yep. Okay, I'll let you go back chronologically now. I just needed to get that in there.
Fair enough. Well, the next one on my list is Can't Get Started from the season finale of season 2. And this is another one of those songs that is so brilliantly used in the show itself because the characters are listening to it in the open. And, you know, Suki points out how beautiful and melodic it is. And Lorelai's like, Suki, do you even like Jackson? It's, you know, it's about someone who can't make it work with someone she loves. And then it comes back at the very end of the episode and closes it out after Lorelai can't make it work with someone she loves. So I suppose that is, you know, another song that sort of is repeated, but it's on a shorter time scale. So it's done a few times in like a very short span. Another one that happens, moving only slightly further ahead, season 3, when Dave is playing Man Who Sold the World on his guitar, like that little guitar riff, and then Miss Kim gives him the stink eye and he stops and goes into a hymn. But then later it backs his first kiss with Lane. That was a really good one.
Yeah. The whole thing, like Korean Thanksgivings. But I want us to talk more about Dave one of these days, but I love how much he was able through music to really get through to Mrs. Kim. And it wasn't really something that I had considered or thought about extensively until preparing for this episode. But I feel like he would have never gotten as far with Lane and therefore into Mrs. Kim's good graces without the musical abilities that he had, that he was able to perpetuate and use in that regard. So
yeah, it's an excellent point.
Pushed him forward and, you know, got him the girl, at least for the short term.
Yeah. I think Mrs. Kim is an underrated music lover in the show because it's very clear that, you know, she likes to sing and likes to have sort of a chorus going on. There's always musical moments at their family gatherings. And, you know, it's not the same type of music that Lane is into, but they can sort of bond over this a little bit as Lane starts to be more of herself with her mom. And not only does it help Mrs. Kim connect with Dave, but also later down the line, it helps her connect with Zach as well when he goes to her wanting permission to marry Lane. And she's like, you have to write a hit song first. And then they do it together. And it's just such a nice bonding moment for them.
Yeah. I wish we had seen more of Mrs. Kim's musical abilities come to the forefront because we know that they're there and they're a part of her past. And she's obviously aware and accepting and cognizant of musical talent in others. But I would have loved to have seen that fleshed out a little bit more for her. And maybe, for lack of a way of putting it better, it would have like made her look like less of a stiff sometimes.
Yeah, it's true. You know, even there's a moment, I forget which episode it's in, but I think it's season 3 when they're still a band with Dave and they're playing. And I think she says, you know, E strings flat too. And Brian's like, was she looking at me? So it's like, she wasn't looking at me, dude. Like she has perfect pitch or something. She just has this natural ear for it. And she plays tambourine. And even Emily Kuroda herself said that she would love to see, you know, a second revival, Mrs. Kim and the twins starting a band. Like, Amy,
you're not the only one who would love that. Yeah, Emily would love it. We would love it.
Exactly.
All a revival and spinoffs, please and thank you. We say it all the time.
We'll take it. Can we have a Gilmore cinematic universe. I mean, Marvel has one, Game of Thrones has one. Like, can we just get one? The fans are clamoring.
They really are.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you're in this fandom and you're watching this, you know, you want it as bad as we do.
Yeah. But to take it back to music, and also more specifically first kisses. Well, I guess it's not really a first kiss, but it's sort of like the first kiss of their actual relationship. Then she appeared. XTC.
Another great XTC.
Let the games begin. Perfection. No notes.
Yeah. Again, pun intended.
Yes.
Yeah. Like, I don't know how Amy and Dan did it, or how they came up with these choices, or how they found these artists and these songs, but it's flawless pretty much almost all the time. So,
yeah, I think it was really a collaboration between Amy and Sam Phillips, because Sam was sort of like the music producer. So she was responsible for the score, but also for helping with the sort of the selection and placement of songs. But there are a lot that Amy just straight up wrote into the script as well. So I think it was really a joint effort on that.
Yeah. Dan definitely has thoughts on music as well, but we will get to that.
Yes, we will. Speaking of Jess, I have another great musical moment that revolves around him and his dad. Suffragette City.
Yep. Oh, Bowie.
Wham bam, thank you, ma'am. Just when they're both sitting there at the table, again, not saying anything, but just sort of like bobbing their heads to this music. And they don't really need to say anything to each other because they can just sort of like tell that there's that commonality there, but neither of them knows how to approach the moment. And so the music stands in. The lyrics aren't particularly relevant to the moment, but at least not that I would say. Maybe somebody else has some other layer of meaning to it that will just blow my mind, but I don't see it. But it's still just one of those great classic songs. And so you can see where Jess gets some of that. And it's unfortunate that neither of them can find the words and that Jimmy just sort of gets up and walks out. But at least Jess sort of follows him to California and tries again and actually is finally able to have that conversation with him. But it kind of starts with Suffragette City.
Yeah. Changing gears slightly, talking about someone and music that we haven't really touched on yet. Richard. Not necessarily from playing an instrument standpoint, but the man had pipes, so it seems, and was perhaps quite the singer. We don't know the extent of his talents, but he did enjoy it, and we know that he was a member of the Whiff and Poofs, so there's that. What do you think about his time with them? Would you have wanted to see more of it and more of Richard in music, or were you just like, no, it's okay taking a backdrop because it's not as important?
I like it as a backdrop. I love it when he goes tailgating at Yale and hears them sing and just joins in. That was perfect. I think if we had too much of him doing that, little moments like that where he's reliving his glory days wouldn't have as much of an impact. So I think that was really cute. And then I do like in season 5 when he's split from Emily and she finds his like gold sequin vest. And he's like, I joined a barbershop quartet. When they make it a good plot point or just sort of like a bit of flavor for Richard, and I think that's when it's at its best.
Yeah.
But that brings me to a musical moment I can't decide if I like or not, which is him and Emily singing "Rory, You're a Bulldog Through and Through" in Under the Breach. I don't know how I feel about that one. Any thoughts?
Do you feel like you don't like it because of like there's no talent there, or it's a bad song choice, or do you not like it because that was the wrong moment to break out a song, like in terms of the event that's going on? What about it do you not like?
more the latter, I think, where it's like, you couldn't have just given a nice speech. You had to write a song like that. And make sure you had a pianist there to back it for you. Like, the song itself wasn't super terrible. But I know that if it were me, I would be mortified. It feels really awkward, kind of out of place. Why would they think to sing? Yeah, I don't know.
I feel like Rory was a bit mortified, but also just heartwarmed at the same time. So I feel like actually Alexis, from an acting standpoint, I think played that off really well with her facial expressions, giving us both in terms of just being a granddaughter who's just like, oh my gosh, like what are they doing right now? But also trying to find and appreciate like the endearing notion behind it and how proud her grandparents are of her. And that was definitely their way of showing that pride in that moment. And I get that. Richard and Emily have weird ways of emoting, and I think that was just one of them. But they were proud of her, and I think it was just their way of showing it. And I think Rory, as much as she was probably just like, dear God, no, was also just like, all right, I'm just going to allow it, and I need to let it happen because this is their way of expressing that.
Yeah, you're right. They do have a weird way of emoting, and that might have been it. And then I guess there's also Richard's love of vinyl, and just Rory kind of buying him records and bringing him records after he's had his heart attack, and Lorelai discovering that he's a Chuck Berry man. Like, the discovery of his sort of, I guess, guilty pleasures, for lack of a better term, when it comes to music.
That's fair. I just want to say, I gotta, like, the Gwen Stefani that comes up at some point, that just randomly hit me.
Yes.
But I'm a Gwen Stefani stan. So yes, please, and thank you.
Yeah, when they play Holla Back Girl at a bat mitzvah, and then followed up with Hava Nagila. Yeah. Incredible. Just, again, Sebastian Bach is everything on this show.
He is.
I'm so glad he was more than just a one-off cameo. He's actually from not far from where I'm from. And so I'm like 40 minutes from where he grew up.
Where he grew up, or does he still currently live there?
Oh, no. He doesn't still live in Peterborough, Ontario, because why would he? I'm not sure if his parents do or if they've since moved, but yeah, so I think he moved quite young out of the area, but like that's sort of where his parents were from and where he was born. And I think his brother played in the NHL. Yeah. Random fun facts.
Family's full of genius.
Yeah. And so obviously, heavy metal icon, Skid Row, just a perfect addition to the show. Someone who added some experience and gravitas to Hep Alien after Dave left. The band, as much as Dave was such an integral part of season 3 and of Lane's self-determination arc, the band didn't really become the band until after Adam Brody was gone, because it didn't even really have a name or a direction or any of that. And so when Sebastian comes in as Gil in season 4 and sticks around, and the band finally starts to get somewhere, it's perfect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Also,
I'm just going to say perfect a lot this episode.
Perfect. It's just perfect. It's just flawless. It's fine. I'm going to probably do the same. I can't believe I didn't think of this one when we were talking about our favorites, because it is one of my favorites. So I will bring it up now as top tier. Dolly. In the revival.
Yes. Here you come again. And here I go.
It was the perfect way to, perfect. Yeah. It's just going to happen.
Yeah. There it is.
It was the perfect way to end off that episode. and really get us going for the entirety of the revival that is still left. Because I think it's just such a brilliant choice to use that right at the end of the first entry into a year in the life. Whereas if you use it at the end of, 3 or 4, what is it doing for us? Because we're coming to a close. But using it at the end of the first season that we get, again, it's getting us as an audience, I think, in the mood to just say, like, yeah, here we go again with Lorelai's love life, with Rory's love life, with all of the mistakes that they've made, that they're going to continue to make, with all of these arcs that we're going to see, with all of the face palms that we're about to do with bad decisions and, like, girl, what are you doing? And just knowing that we have 3 more entries left in this, it just fits so well in terms of getting us in the spirit and setting the stage for what we're about to see. Again, just brilliant. Just brilliant.
You almost could have opened that episode with that same song, and it would have worked almost as beautifully and brilliantly as that. But just that piano lick at the beginning there is just amazing. I love it.
Oh, yeah. No, I haven't envisioned myself playing it all the time.
And I don't sing it to myself regularly.
We'll make it happen.
I'm not much of an instrumentalist, but I did used to sing a cappella. So, I mean, I'm no Dolly, but
and I'm an instrumentalist. So that might go down one day.
Someday we'll collab.
Yeah. I'll learn it.
Yeah. Another incredible entry from that same, actually, no, I'm going to back this up because I had another point I wanted to make first before I get into a specific talk. But we did have this chat a few days ago where I was like, the only episode of the revival that opens with music at all is Summer.
Mm-hmm.
I most like, spring ends with music, summer opens with music, and fall ends just completely like silent. And then the theme song kicks in.
Yep.
For the first time in the revival. I think it was certainly impactful to leave it to the end. And then, okay, going back to what I was going to say, the other thing that I absolutely adored from Winter was Winter Glow by Grantley Phillips. That's on my Christmas playlist. Like, yeah, it's so, I listened to it the other day. It's May. Like, it's so good. I love Grant and everything he did for the show, as the town troubadour. Yeah. Which leads us into another brilliant discussion, because what other TV show has a town troubadour that's used for, these really interesting transitions between moments and scenes and emotional arcs, but also has like a bit of almost a storyline to himself? Like the Love Daisies and Troubadours episode where Dave Gripper Allen comes into town and is treading on his territory, and then we find out his whole shtick as a troubadour is like he's supposed to have a bit of mystique. People aren't supposed to know his name, and they're not supposed to know what he does for a living, and they're not also supposed to give him money. He doesn't want tips, or he's not busking. So it's just him there entertaining the town. And it's funny because people sort of get the idea of troubadours as like wandering minstrels, basically, but they didn't really wander. They were more stationary. They would typically be employed by a court and would stay there for quite some time. They might eventually move on to another court, but like they were sort of like the in-house musical singer-songwriter. They wrote their own stuff. They played their own stuff. They sang their own stuff. Just, exactly as Grant does. He uses the Grantley Buffalo music. It's his band that provides that music and that backdrop for Stars Hollow. So it is this perfect sort of purist idea of being a troubadour. And it made me wonder, who do we think his patron is? Who's patronizing this guy to be the entertainment for Stars Hollow?
I'm going to tinfoil theory it and say Taylor.
That would make Taylor the best actor ever because he was like, who even are you?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of, and I think to the finale of season 6, when all of the troubadours show up to take over the town, and he goes into Luke Steiner and he's like, Luke, do you see what's going on here? Like, who are these people? Like, what is actually happening? Like, and Luke's just like, oh, I don't know, like, I'm just doing my thing here. And Taylor's just like, oh gosh, like I can't with all of them. So yeah, like tinfoil theory, but it would be so remarkable and amusing to me if the whole time, yeah, it was just this facade that Taylor was putting on, and secretly this whole time he was just funding this guy to be in the town square, providing Stars Hollow with musical entertainment, but never wanting to own up to it for whatever reason.
That's part of the mystique.
I'm gonna buy into it.
Like, he would be the most likely contributor if he wasn't also such a curmudgeon who seems to hate the troubadours. Like, it's such a Oscar-worthy performance if he is, in fact, the one who's like, yes, troubadours, we need this in Stars Hollow. But yeah, you make an excellent reference to Partings with all of the... And it's amazing because those troubadours are real artists, for the most part, who have been used and played extensively in the show. You know, you get Sonic Youth and their daughter. You know, you get Kim and Thurston and Coco all playing together. And you get, I think, Joe Pernice. Dave Rogalski might make an appearance. I think Dan Palladino wrote The Beaver Ate My Thumb. I think Sparks makes an appearance. And Sam Phillips. Very notably plays Taking Pictures. And oh, I just love that whole montage in the town square with all of them. Brilliant. I need to like pull up a thesaurus, search for brilliant and perfect, because
yeah,
I'm running out of adjectives for the music on the show. All right, I'm gonna change gears a little bit. We spent a lot of time talking about what we love, which there's a lot of, and like there are things I have on my list that we haven't even broached yet. But I wanted to throw out one of my least favorite moments as well. And I'm gonna reiterate Candyman. Because like it's so gross. Like it sort of harkens back to their first date with Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. So it's kind of sweet, but like you have this really already kind of gross moment in terms of what they've just done ethically. And it's supposed to be sweet and intimate and romantic, and she just puts on this like goofy song about candy that we last heard coming out of Taylor Dosey's mouth in season 3, like when he was opening his candy shop, and it just feels icky.
You're not wrong.
Yeah.
You're not wrong.
Any thoughts on that? Or like, what's your favorite, or sorry, least favorite musical moment?
The musical?
Oh, there it is. The pink glittery elephant in the room. You knew we were going to talk about it.
We have thoughts.
So many thoughts.
My first thought that I'll start off with is what?
And, you know, I'm going to follow that up with, what? It's bad.
All I will say is that if I had to pick a way even better than what we just said to encapsulate the absurdity of that musical, it is just that the second that it starts and we're like 10, 15 seconds in and you see Lorelai and she's just like, what the
yeah.
And everyone else is like, shh, no. But like, that's it right there. That's all you need to know about it. Her just initial WTF bomb. And then it's just another 10 to 12 minutes after that of just like, what?
Yeah. The whole sequence from Taylor introducing it to Violet's confrontation with Lorelai in the shadows. I don't need your validation. takes about 20 minutes. And that's not including the scenes of Taylor pitching the idea and getting town buy-in, or the audition scenes, or the Unbreakable scene. And so it's like, this is a 90-minute episode, and you've spent at least 25 of them on this musical that is actively bad. And so my question for you that I'm curious to know your answer to, I don't think I've ever asked you this before. Do you think the musical was bad on purpose?
Yes.
Okay. Show your work.
I'm sorry?
Show your work.
Yeah. It's something that I wish I had had the time to explore more, because I would have loved to have delve into it a little bit deeper. But the whole notion of the absurdity of theater, which is a very prevalent and widely held notion, not even like a notion or a belief, but it's just, it's a thing within the theater universe. And we see it perpetuated in the 50s and 60s with Albee, and just all of the playwrights that were coming to the forefront in that. You see like Waiting for Godot. I think you even see it pop up in a lot of works like from Tennessee Williams, where you wouldn't necessarily expect it. But it's just this concept that everything is so far-fetched and removed from realism, and that it's based on a non-foundation, so to say, where you're taking religious and political ideologies and beliefs and you're just completely throwing them out the window for the sake of absurd comedy and absurd theater that is built on nothing, that holds no water, stands no ground, and just leaves the entire audience in this really abstract notion of just being like, what am I watching? And there's even a play that does it, where the whole notion of the play is just, it's a white canvas, and these people are trying to look at this white canvas and try and figure out what it is. And people come in and say like, oh, it's art, it's beautiful, it's everything, like it's worth $1 million. And other people are just like, it's a white canvas. I will tangentialize on theater here if you let me, so I need to stop myself. But it's the absurd notion that nothing is grounded in reality, and that everything is so abstract and no one can make anything of it because there really is nothing to make of it. It's just so far removed from truth and reality in every way and in every aspect. And I saw a lot of that come to the forefront here with this musical, where it's like, I don't know if we're supposed to find meaning in it. I think the point is that maybe there is no meaning or truth to it, because it's just absurd. And it does what absurd theater is supposed to and meant to do.
Stars Hollow itself is absurd. It always has been. Taylor Dosey especially is absurd. And so it feels entirely believable to me. And therefore it's a pitch perfect, pun intended, concept that this would happen, that he would go to this place, that he would be earnest enough, another theater pun, earnest enough to believe that a musical about the town's history is just what they need to perk up tourism. And so like it feels like something he would do. And writing a terrible book and lyrics also feels like something terrible he would do. And it's funny because, like, I'm gonna be real with you, I actually find some of the songs really catchy. I regularly find myself like humming or singing to myself, we're working on building Stars Hollow. Like, yeah. Unbelievable. Just so catchy. And, you know, the composer who did the music for it did Caroline or Change and did, what was it called? Fun Home or something? Janine Tesori did the music. She's a real composer. And I think that's why the music itself, removed from its lyrics, is kind of great. It's just the sort of, obviously the absurd staging of it, just two people on a stage with the moving backgrounds, and they're obviously just sort of like shuffling around the stage and changing costumes. And I think, a huge part of why it's so funny is a credit to Sutton Foster and Christian Borle, who just knocked their performances out of the park as well. But something about that feels so weird is that they're not residents of Stars Hollow.
Mm-hmm.
This is supposed to be about Stars Hollow for Stars Hollow, and it's all these outsiders who are just coming in and looking for a break in Stars Hollow, which is absurd in itself. So that might be part of why it sort of doesn't click. Like, it would be so much funnier if it was Kirk and Babette and Patty, and, you know, maybe Andrew throws his hat in the ring, or Bootsy, you know, actually people who we've known and have followed all these years. But instead they bring in actual Broadway actors who we know have done big things and have won Tonys, and they're pretending to be these nobodies gunning for something in Stars Hollow.
I will say that I feel like at that point we had already gotten our due diligence of Kirk and Miss Patty in their own one-person shows.
Buckle up, nice. I'm Patty.
is Kirk like just a second birth? I just love that whole scene, and then Lorelai and
yeah, we've got magic to do.
Like, Lorelai and Zeke, you're just like ew.
And now Kirk will perform the journey of man. Again,
you're missing it. Kirk's dying.
That whole thing is priceless, but not musical. So that'll be for our talk of other cultural references.
But maybe. I will say, so I don't know. It does make sense to me that you have outsiders coming in, because again, I hearken back to Partings when all of the troubadours were showing up in Stars Hollow, and Taylor Dosey's explanation was because one troubadour just got noticed and booked for a tour. So now they're all coming here thinking that it's going to be their big break. I don't know, maybe there was a similar thought process where it's just like, you know, small towns can maybe get you places if the right people notice you. Like, I don't know. What I will say, another random thing that I did appreciate about it, that I've recognized just through doing my own theater work, there's a strong nod in that musical to the works of Rodgers and Hammerstein. Cinderella, Oklahoma, most predominantly, I think It's a Great Night for Singing. I flash back to all of these musicals that were really prevalent and so beloved in the 50s and 60s, when Rodgers and Hammerstein were pulling out a lot of their things. You know, they also obviously did a lot of other works too. I'm not going to name all of them, but musical theater in that regard, and as we see it here, is so, I think, head scratching for us in this day and age, as if to say, like, what are we watching? Like, what is this? It's so problematic. It's not necessarily okay from a content standpoint, but again, it was the 50s and 60s, so things were different. But I feel like there was a real nod to that time of musical theater. And then I feel like it's immediately countered with a Hamilton nod and musical theater that we're getting in this day and age, with the rap coming into play and how Hamilton incorporated that into their showcase and their production. I would love to pick Dan's brain about it more if I ever got the chance to talk to him, because I know he was behind pretty much all of what we saw there. But it's like, what were you trying to achieve? What were you trying to do? What were you alluding to or nodding to in the past? What point were you trying to make? Because for all of the thoughts that I have about it, I don't know if any of them are right or substantial, but I would love to know, like, what were you going for there?
I think it was meant to be parodic. Like, it was meant to be derivative of Rodgers and Hammerstein and of Hamilton. It was meant for Taylor to be pulling from all of these great creators who came before him to try to match their level. And even Lorelai points it out when they're sitting in the circle. She's like, well, then isn't it a little bit derivative if Hamilton did it? And he's like, so? You know, I think it really was him trying to feel like an artiste by, like, combining a bunch of like inspirations from other works that came before, and he just failed at it fairly miserably. But something that you said about the 50s and 60s sort of piqued something for me, because some of those musicals are set in time periods before, and so is this. This is sort of like time travel. It goes all the way back to the founding of the town. So it's like it starts in the modern day, and you get that sort of line at the beginning where she's like, what's the actual line? I think I have it here somewhere. It's, he's saying like, the past would be better than any future with you. And then he, throws the cup, and she's got the fake bruise and all of that. And so I think they're sort of playing with the ideas of looking to the past and honoring the past, or not honoring, but like idealizing the past and showing how it was kind of messed up. And I think this is capped off beautifully at the end when they do Waterloo and the 9 ABBA songs. But one of the lyrics from that song is, the history book on the shelf is always repeating itself. Waterloo couldn't escape if I wanted to. Mm-hmm. Which just goes to kind of the whole theme of not only the musical, but the show. History repeats itself. This sort of obsession with history and replaying it over and over and over again and rewriting it each time. Because as you see, basically each iteration of the Revolutionary War reenactment has a slight tweak from the last one. They're always finding out something new about history and revising, adding, changing. And I think that goes to the heart of sometimes the stories we tell, and this like historical revisionism of not only the town, but of Lorelai and Rory. It's almost like Rory going in to write this book. Again, we've talked about this before, but the theory that the show in its first couple seasons is Rory's book, and the revival is real life. And so we're seeing more unvarnished portraits of these characters. Whereas before, especially in the early seasons, they were sort of the sanitized versions of themselves, if you will. And so the idea that maybe it's a little bit of Rory's historical revisionism at play, that she's downplaying some of the more problematic aspects of herself and of her mother, while maybe playing up the problematic aspects of other people. And I think this is emblematic of all of that. It starts hollow, tooting its own horn and being like, we're so great and modern society sucks, but we're awesome. Like just that whole what's there not to love about Stars Hollow song. Again, I have the lyrics here because they're so funny. And it absolutely is very Taylor Dosey. But it's just his whole attitude. The world is a terrible place. There's junk mail and terrorism, tiny airplane seats, new weird viruses. Okay, that was too, like, I'm Nostradamus. A little too uncomfy. Yeah. Really small print and tank tops. Anything by Jeff Koons. Spam, not the food. Man buns, those Occupy radicals. What restaurants charge for wine. True. And Putin, and Putin, and Putin. Like, also too prescient for my liking.
Yeah, I was about to say, maybe we should contact Michael Winters and see if this man, like, what else have you got for us coming, dude? Like, what's on tap for 2024? Give us a heads up.
Are you a prophet? Should we know something more? Because, wow. Yeah. But it's just, again, sort of being like, this world sucks. The past was better. And it feeds into the idea of history repeating itself and it just being something you can't escape. Like if you don't learn history, you're forced to repeat it. You'll never escape these cycles.
Yeah. I will say, I think the musical did a really good job of perpetuating that and trying to drive home that point of just like, you don't want to, nodding to the past, but not necessarily making it out like it was better. Because I mean, I even think of lines in musical where it's just like, oh, we're going to have 14 kids and hope that 3 survive. Where I'm just yeah.
And the line about incest.
Yeah, and it's just like, we're brother and sister, but it's not illegal yet. Like, so here we go. And then, yeah, it's immediately followed up by like a 14-3 kid comment. But I just, of course, like Lorelai is just sitting there like face palming at that point. Like, oh, like what is happening? And like just all of that problematic things aside, I love how like she's just sitting right next to Sam Pancake and just be like, do you have a pen? And he's like, why? And she's like, because advisory board, like, do you not see all of these problems right now? And it's staggering to me. But I think that was also maybe a point that was trying to be made where it's like, no one in the town saw or took any issue with the musical. They were all just like, it's great, Taylor. It's the best thing since sliced bread. We love it. And Lorelai's just like, can we talk about this? Like, I think maybe there was a message that was trying to be sent there too, where a lot of society and a large subset of cultures and people and groups of people within any country can necessarily overlook really egregious problems. And maybe there's a small few who recognize change that needs to happen and just how bad things are, and don't see things as black and white as maybe some other people do. And I feel like maybe Lorelai was a bit emblematic of that in recognizing, you guys, this is effed. Like, we need to do something about this. But then the rest of the town was just like, no, this is great. It's fine. Like, what's the problem here? I feel like maybe there was a tell that was trying to be had there too, and a message that was trying to subtly be sent to us.
Like, look a little deeper, be a little more critical.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think, what's funny is part of me hates the musical. Part of me's like, oh, this is boring. I can't even watch it. It's so cringy. But when you look at it a little bit closer and you sort of go a level deeper than that, you're just like, you have to be kind of ingenious to write things bad that also makes a meta point about the absurdity of musical theater. Mm-hmm. And so it was kind of right how they did it. It was sort of like, wow, all right, I think I see what you were getting at there. But I don't know that that makes it more watchable.
Yeah.
It's so good. It's so good at being bad that it's actually bad.
That is bad.
Yeah, it doesn't make it any more watchable, unfortunately. But like, I'll probably still continue to hum What's There Not to Love About Stars Hollow fairly regularly, because really, what is there not to love except the musical? Yeah, it's funny how Lorelai seems to be the only contrarian, but I think it also goes to show like just how, she loves this town and she's been welcomed in by them, but she's still not quite one of them. She's still always going to be just like a little bit removed, a little bit different. And I think it's, just maybe something she can see from a different angle than people who are just so deep in the town mythology that they're like, yeah, this was amazing. But and sort of related to the musical, but spinning off of it, the other thing that I hate and almost always skip over is the Unbreakable song. How do you feel about that one? Because, like, again, Sutton Foster has an amazing voice. It has nothing to do with her performance. Or even, like, if you read the lyrics of the song, they're not even that bad. They're not particularly profound or anything. But the fact that Lorelai has a profound revelation while listening to that song is just like, why? What is this? Do you have any takes on that particular song? Because I'm just at a loss with it, and I like it.
I mean, I don't think it bothered me necessarily as much as it might have for you. Again, I think it's important to separate, again, Sutton Foster versus what the actress was doing, which is very important here. Especially
I love the Broadway performers, like both Sutton and Christian, and also Carrie Butler as both the therapist and a theater wannabe, an actress wannabe. Just
which was an excellent.
Anyway, continue.
And you have to remember that, like, and not you, because I know that you do, but anyone watching needs to remember that these are not necessarily the views of the actor or the actress. They're filling a role. So when lyrics are problematic, they're problematic. But I didn't find myself necessarily, I don't know, as concerned by it, or just, you know, hang on, I need to pause over it. I thought it was, again, this is the environment that these people live in. It kind of makes sense to me that something like this would go down, and that a song like this would be in there, and that these lyrics would be in there. And I think that from an acting standpoint, again, she, with this and with everything that she's done, she really found and struck a really good common ground with putting forth the message of what she, as the singer and as someone who's putting, like, I'm not illustrating this well, but as someone who is putting forth those lyrics and those words necessarily is trying to communicate, versus recognizing that that's not the ideology that she perpetuates. So it didn't bother me so much, because, again, I feel like sometimes you need to know that it's just going to be par for the course for the show and the world that we're living in here. But what's your take on it? Was it more problematic for you than it might have been for me?
I don't think it was problematic. I just think, again, it was weird and boring and out of place. Like, it doesn't match the rest of the musical at all in tone or lyrics. And it's just, again, like, Lorelai's overly emotive response to it is just completely out of touch with her previous cynicism about this entire process. And when it's, like, not even a particularly rousing song, it just, again, makes no sense. And everybody else around her is contrarian once more, where they're like, total snooze fest, that's a cut. Like, they're right. It's a cut. It's not a great song, and it doesn't fit in this musical at all. It has nothing to do with Stars Hollow, and it's frankly not even touch it. Like, I don't know. I wasn't moved by it. Maybe I'm dead inside, which is true, but you know, it just once again was like, I'm sitting through a cringy song in this episode, and I really shouldn't have to. I think they spent too much time on this musical. It would have been funny if it was a gag, and, like, you know, there were a few scenes, maybe a few musical numbers where it was just like, this is obviously, you know, Taylor's little pet project. It's his love letter to the town. It's cute, it's funny, and then have it sort of like have a punchline. But, like, when the whole thing is a bizarro, absurdist punchline that tries to have an emotional denouement, I'm like, that it didn't work for me.
Do you think it's because, again, was it just the song didn't work for you, or you feel like Sutton didn't do a good enough job?
No, again, it's not Sutton. I think it's sort of the inclusion of the song, the writing of it, the placement in the episode, and Lorelai's particular emotional response to hearing the song about your life not turning out the way you thought it was going to, and needing to be unbreakable. It's never or now. It makes no sense that someone like Lorelai would be having such an emotional reaction to this. I think it's because she's just coming off a fight with Luke, and she, you know, is having some questions about her life and her relationship. And after losing Richard as well, you know, she is in a strange place emotionally, I guess. But it just, the whole concept of the musical leading into, like, oh, we have this other number that, you know, we want your opinion on it. And it's just sort of like, apropos of nothing when it comes to this musical. It's not related to the other songs. It doesn't have the same vibe. It doesn't speak to anything about the town or its history. It's just, it shouldn't be there in the musical. So the fact that Taylor's like, we wrote this extra song. Why? You're just writing songs now. This isn't a musical. It's just you writing songs. And so, like I said, you know, the musical had no point. It doesn't return in fall. We just get these sort of like wacky scenes of Lorelai coming up with zingers. They use it as an excuse to insert Broadway performers and zingers about other Broadway musicals like The Book of Mormon and all that. Speaking of, Babette's zingers were in fact incredible. So, you know,
yeah,
it just the structure of it felt funny. It was overlong. I don't think it accomplished what they wanted to accomplish. And Lorelai comes out of it listening to this stupid song being like, I'm going to do Wild, which is another contentious plotline. And so I just think the whole sort of, the gag went on too long, and it ended up going so far as to no longer be funny. And then they tried to make it emotional, and it didn't hit. It didn't land.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I don't think I could have said that better myself. So, is there anything else about the seasons or the revival from a musical standpoint that you feel like you want to highlight in terms of loving or hating?
I've got one more, and it's also related to the musical. It's where Taylor mentions that, you know, the 9 ABBA songs might be legally problematic, and that he has calls in to 2 of the members of the group. But while they're waiting for it, Sophie offers, she's like, you know, Taylor, I've got some songs that I wrote. You could totally use them. And Carole King plays I Feel the Earth Move. And and everyone's like, no, it's not catchy. And it's like, that's a pretty cute moment. But, like, do you have anything else?
No, I mean, I will say we didn't really get to talking a lot about Hep Alien and the band and their foundation and then their tour and their successes, their triumphs, their failures, their stumbling points. But I feel like that can and maybe should be a conversation on its own in terms of just bands and band dynamics, because if we start talking about that now, we'll be here for another hour.
It's true. You're right. Like, music is such a huge part of Lane's character. And so I did have some notes about her in this, but we also have a character deep dive planned for her in the future. And it might be a more opportune time to really dig into the band. But yeah, I guess just also just one last little musical moment on that note to throw in. When they played I'm a Believer at the wedding. Just, you know, when Hep Alien gets back together and they play I'm a Believer. That's really great. Oh, and Greatest American Hero, I think it is, the Jackson's victory song, Believe It or Not. Excellent Hep Alien moments. But we'll get more into sort of like the band dynamics for them at a later date. And I guess I do have one more revival one that sort of plays off of the Carole King thing, which is Louise Goffin's brief cameo, where she comes into town as a troubadour, and Grant tries to chase her out of town, and he's like, this is my territory, but I'm your sister, says Mom.
Doesn't matter.
Mom lies.
Yeah. And just in case anyone watching doesn't know, Louise, who is the actress in that scene and in that moment, is Carole King's daughter. So It was a really wonderful just nod to see her spotlighted in that way, especially since they did the song revamp for what we've got for this.
Yeah, which brings us right back to the beginning with Where You Lead by Carole King and Louise Goffin as the theme song.
Yeah. Again, I've had people personally that I know tell me that they don't like the intro and they don't like the song. And I've heard people within the Gilmore Girls universe and the fandom say that they don't necessarily love it. It's not the best, like, across all of television that has ever existed. Certainly not the best intro or song pairing, but it's not bad to me. Granted, every time we watch episodes, we're always skipping over it, but I think that's just from a repetitiveness nature at this point. But we're not skipping over it because it's bad, just because, like, in the same way that I skip over the Game of Thrones intro, it's like, I've heard it, I know what it is, I don't need to listen to it, just get me to the episode. But I enjoy the mother-daughter redo of the song. I think it worked well. It's obviously emblematic of Lorelai and Rory. And I'm here for it and the success that it garnered, because I know that even when they were recording it, you know, she told her own daughter, like, don't expect too much out of this because it's just a pilot and pilots don't always get picked up. So this might never go anywhere. But it took off, and now it's something that is so easily recognized and so synonymous and in conjunction with this show, where you can't hear one without thinking of the other, especially if you are a Gilmore Girls fan. So 2 thumbs up. I enjoy it. I like it. And I think it does what it needed to do in terms of an intro, and it just fits and works for me.
Yeah, I go through phases where I'm like, yeah, I love the song. Like, if it comes up on the shuffle on my phone, sometimes I'll be like, yeah, this is a vibe right now. And other times I'm like, skip! Like, get out of here. Not in the mood for that. And you're right. I think it is just a repetition thing where sometimes I will listen to a song endlessly and will not get tired of it. This is not one of those songs. Yeah. But the fact that it used to be sort of a stand by your man song and was changed to be a mother-daughter song, upgrade in my eyes. And yeah, I do think the story of it is sweet because, you know, Carole tweaked it to be more friendly to mother-daughter. It's only the second verse. And when they recorded it, they did it in Louise's laundry room, and it was produced by her husband. Mm-hmm. And her young son was in the room while they were doing it too. So it was just like the generations and the family, and just how kind of perfect that is thematically for the show in real life. It hits all the right notes for me on that front. I can't stop making music puns now. I'm sorry, not sorry. Yeah. Overall, I think solid pick. And I do kind of like that they saved it for the very end of the revival. I think, again, full circle moments, thematically on point.
Yep. I agree.
Any other thoughts on music in the show?
I mean, again, not without leading us into another hour plus long discussion on things. So
yeah, I have approximately 8 million other thoughts.
Yes. But I think that's a good way for us to wind down here. Again, we will get to Hep Alien on Lane's character study. We always have a million points that we know we will circle back to, because we never get to talk about everything that we want to talk about, but that's why this podcast exists. And we promise that we will eventually always get to everything. In the meantime, what have we got coming up next?
Ooh, once again, we are returning to the topic of motherhood. But this time, we're going to be talking about mom shaming. So just, you know, the judgments from one mom to another, or from outsiders onto moms. Obviously, we're dealing with fictional characters here, and it can be very tempting to leap to judgments about these characters' behaviors and forget that, like, people in the real world have to live under very similar circumstances and make similar choices. So I think it's interesting. And I think as a society, we're having a bit of a reckoning with especially the rise of social media and how much of our lives and our parenting journeys are now being put online for other people's judgment and consumption. Like, just how much we're sort of inserting ourselves and our own beliefs and our own paradigms into the decisions other people make with their kids. And I think the show's a really interesting venue to explore it, obviously, because, you know, we have a lot of moms we could look at, and we have a lot of meta conversation about these moms that we can look at. And so I also want to maybe look at some mom guilt as well, in terms of, like, parents shaming themselves for their bad decisions, or maybe parents who should be shaming themselves for their bad decisions but aren't. Emily, I'm looking at you. So, stuff like that. So we're going to just kind of look at how we're maybe a little too harsh on mom sometimes, but also maybe not harsh enough.
Mm-hmm. That's fair. We have thoughts. Come back and join us for those. In the meantime, again, I will bring this up just because why not? It's going to get closer every single week. FanFest is coming. Algonquin, Maine this fall. There have already been numerous guests from the show announced that will be there. If you're a Gigi fan, you need to be at this event. It is just a wonderful weekend full of people from the show, just other fans like us who are just so into this world and just so passionate about it. So go look it up, buy a ticket. It is worth attending, and we would just love to be able to meet and get to know more Gilmore Girls fans. And so we hope that you'll be there. If you're seeing this, again, just go buy a ticket. I promise you won't regret it.
Yeah, like there will be meet and greets with all of these cast members and crew members that show up. And they show up really regularly. They're so devoted to the fandom, and they just love being there. And there will be, late night drinking sessions with Nick Holmes.
Yeah.
That's personally something I'm looking forward to.
They'll have dinner and drinks with you. They'll take selfies with you on the streets. They're so into it, and they're so passionate about it. So get yourself to Maine this fall if you can. It'll be a great weekend.
Well, I'm wearing my always maintain proper spacing and distance shirt, which was
there it is.
Some of the merch from the 2020 virtual. And I don't know if it was designed before that and the same company just still had the shirt, but I think it was a pandemic thing, and it just is so delightful. It works. So appropriate FanFest.
Yeah. While you wait for FanFest, while we wait for FanFest, go back and catch some of our old videos if you want more content. There's a lot that we've already talked about you can catch up on while you wait for next Friday's episode. And please remember to do all the YouTubey things for us. Please like this video, subscribe to our channel. It's one click, and it really, really does help us out, and we appreciate all of that. And again, if you're feeling extra generous, please just share this video, tell anyone that you know about it, and just give us a listen, because we appreciate that support as well. We're always so grateful for it. In the meantime, that's going to wrap us up for this week. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we will see you next Friday night for dinner.
Bye.
Bye.